Kamieta didn't miss a beat. His eyes widened slightly. Have you ever wondered what it would... I don't know. Hinata swallowed, mouth dry like he was straddled in the middle of the ocean. Oh my gosh. What about you? I'm not reading that. I meant, well, I suppose so. What? I'm sure everyone has thought about something like that. Trash like me deserves trash like me, right? Komaeda shivered. I wonder what I would do. The distorted image of his arm moved underwater, a pale greenish shade rapidly and reforming with each wave that passed, and Hinata could swear that he couldn't see Komaeda's hand anymore. Would I treat myself roughly, unable to hold in my scorn at having to see my own shameful, pitiful form before me? Or would I lose my nerve and do it gently? His voice cracked a little, and Hinata felt like he had been slapped in the face. Using my fingers to make sure I was ready. I'm not sure I deserve such kind treatment. Oh my gosh. What do you think, Hinata-kun? Hinata had absently started stroking over his erection through the fabric of his suit before sharply realizing that meant his hand was technically visible. Plausible deniability. He wasn't sure if it was better or worse, but he slowly, hesitantly dipped his hand into his suit, obscuring it. Obscuring it from what? He wasn't sure. One by one, he let his fingers settle against bare skin. I think he forgotten the question. I think you would do something weird. Komaeda let out a soft laugh and skipped out over the water like a stone. What does that mean coming from you, I wonder? He took a strange sounding breath, and Hinata couldn't quite tell if his shoulder was moving while he spoke. Hinata let several inappropriate thoughts go unsaid and suddenly remembered something he'd heard once. You like licking shoes or having them licked? I don't know. Why are you asking me? Hinata wondered how long he could hold his breath if he had just dipped for a while. Komaeda laughed again and gently picked up the thread Hinata had dropped, wavering it easily back to his filthy tapestry. Something like that, I'm sure, but my needs aren't really important, are they? There was a tiny splash as his shoulder jerked. If you use my body to feel good, I'll be completely satisfied, even if you forgot I even existed only moments afterward. Hinata-kun, how do you think it would compare to... Hinata took a deep breath, as though he'd actually gone on the water. Good. He answered automatically, like the simple, lonely response he had been waiting for his chance to emerge. He started stroking himself in earnest at some point during this exchange, careful to only move his wrist while he did it, and his shoulders stayed still. He wondered what they looked like from the cottages. Maybe only their hair was visible above the wall. I'm glad to hear you say that. Komaeda sighed, groaned in relief, and shut his eyes tightly like he was in pain. If I couldn't make you feel good, I don't know what I would do. His other hand came out of the water to tangle in his own hair. I would squeeze around you, hoping that feeling's what you liked. Maybe it would hurt getting tighter, but you keep moving because it's warm. Okay. Tiny rivulets, what is that word, dripped over his cheek. Hinata knew it was pool water, but it painted such a clear picture of Komaeda exerting himself, dripping sweat, overstimulated. I try to move too, desperate to make sure you come. Even though I'm trembling from the feeling of Hinata-kun being inside, it's better than anything I could imagine or describe. Komaeda suddenly covered his mouth as though trying to stifle a sound, but Hinata heard it anyway. The small hitch in his throat, the way he whimpered as though Hinata was actually yeah. Hinata's whole body jerked, and the sound of splashing water covered most of whatever shameful sound he just made. His fingers felt the evidence that he had finished, and he quickly pulled his hand. Gosh dang. Dang. I guess he was right that he wasn't even going to touch him. His fingers felt the evidence that he finished, and he quickly pulled his hand out of his trunks and squatted down in the water, hoping to dissipate it. If it was there. If he could see it. He didn't want to know. Though he did kind of want to know if Komaeda was in a similar situation. Didn't so much finish as simply. He recovered instantly the heavy, dirty atmosphere lifted around him, and his posture and expression returned unscathed from the loose splattering of adjectives he'd been commanding only moments earlier. Are you done? Is it a little unsanitary to do something like that in a public pool? And that is splashed up before he even could finish speaking, a completely automatic response. It kind of feels like I should get out now. Get out now that you claim this pool as your own. Gosh dang. Komaeda laughed while shielding himself from the red ground splashes. Don't worry too much, Hinata-kun. That's what all the chlorine is for. You're horrible. Hinata's voice had become a whine. Oh, that's cute. But he could only muster so much energy to post dirty talk haze, and his vengeful splashes quickly lost power. He slumped over, feeling defeated. I know I've been telling you that all along. Yeah, he ain't getting away with this. He's not. Not for the first time, and not for the last. Komaeda's smile read like a challenge, daring him to keep up. Hinata moved quickly, pushing off the bottom of the pool to propel himself forward before Komaeda had time to react. He was pressed up against the other boy in an instant, water sloshing and a narrow depths of space between them, the sounds of rippling current echoing back to him. Hinata ducked as far below the wall as he could without going under, wrapping one arm around Komaeda's shoulders and pushing him up against the tile. The logical part of his brain had probably skated right off the edge of a wicked half-pipe because he wasn't here to offer any better ideas. From the cottages, he hoped the pool now looked empty, and God helped him if there was anyone left at the hotel. Hinata-kun. Komaeda wheezed, still seeming shocked from the sudden contact. Aren't you worried? Of course I'm worried. He cut off the obvious question by nipping at Komaeda's jaw, trailing quick, light little bites down his throat until he found a place to stop, sealing his mouth over its skin and sucking gently. He tasted like chlorine, of course, but Hinata could also taste the sounds he was making, directly into his ear, soft, appreciative whimpering. So you better keep quiet. Ooh, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? He clamped his wet hand on the Komaeda's mouth as he pulled away to look him in the eyes, already missing the sounds. Komaeda's hand hooked around the back of Hinata's neck, and Hinata was no longer sure who was holding who into place. Oh, he slid his other hand down Komaeda's stomach, applying pressure as it crept lower, pressing into the sensitive skin below his navel before he snagged the drawstring of his suit. Komaeda groaned against his palm, hips shifting impatiently under his hand. It was so easy to pretend like all of this came naturally, like he had done it countless times before, like he knew exactly what he was doing. Komaeda made it easy, so long as Hinata didn't think too hard about what that actually meant. If all of this, everything Komaeda said or did with him, was all part of some manipulative scheme, well, he could think of worse ways to be manipulated. He slid his fingers through Komaeda's drawstring and pulled one side of his bow slightly until the other knot fell apart. He felt Komaeda make a startled sound against his palm as he exposed just enough of him to bear to the water. His hand moved between Komaeda's legs, and Hinata was relieved to feel how hard he was. Proof that they'd at least been enduring this state together. What should I do? I should have saved before this. I should have saved. Are there different outcomes? Do some dirty talk to him. Do I absolutely don't do any dirty talk. Yeah, I'm dirty talk. If Hinata was going to beat Komaeda at his own game, they had to at least be playing the same game. He thought about the way his words had painted not just a picture but a feeling, combining his own imagination with physical sensations to create something real. His hand tensed and he started slowly stroking, then leaned in to whisper softly in Komaeda's ear. My fingers are all wrinkly from being in the water for a long time, so I think that makes it feel better. He couldn't see his face, but Komaeda tried to make another sound from behind his hand. It probably feels good, so he can't help himself. Okay. Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I'm sorry, I'm not reading. I'm just kind of upset because what are you doing? Okay, that was weird. All right, I should have known there's gonna be something weird. He ran his hand slowly between Komaeda's eyes, testing how much he would remove his. That's embarrassing. Oh my gosh! Like, you gotta be kidding me. Testing how much he could move his arm without making any noisy splashes above the surface. I'm just so disappointed in him right now. That was so disappointing. Komaeda wrapped his arms around his shoulders and his balance shifted. Suddenly, Hinata was supporting the other boy's weight completely. An easy task in the water, but one that nonetheless made him feel more in control. He felt Komaeda's legs drift upward to loosely wrap around him, lightly anchoring his hips between his knees. Hinata peeled his fingers away from Komaeda's mouth, so that he could hold him up more securely against the wall, silently begging him to keep quiet on his own. Komaeda just smiled at him and Hinata started moving his hand. Komaeda closed his eyes and let his head fall back, dangerously close to going under. Hinata paused to readjust her position, but he could feel Komaeda going limp, as if it was no longer worth it to stay above water. Gosh dang. Hey, you gotta help me out here a little. Hinata whispered against his hair. You're too relaxed. Whenever Komaeda crept into Hinata's room at night, he left himself vulnerable. They were both vulnerable, but nothing like this. With his head only above the surface, Komaeda's eyes flicked open, locking into Hinata's gaze. You could hold me under. Excuse me? He mouthed as much as he spoke, gently squeezing the back of Hinata's neck with one hand that still held onto him. Stop that. Hinata pulled him up so that he was high out of the water. Don't do that right now. Not now. Of course, it would be a bad plan since you've been seen here with me today. But we could arrange for him. Komaeda was cut off when Hinata leaned in to kiss him. He leaned harder against the wall, pressing Komaeda's shoulders against it for support, and started to touch him again. Oh, okay. As it was cool. It was cool underwater, but Hinata could feel heat in his hand and the quickening pulse of someone who was still breathing. Despite his mouth being sealed, small sounds escaped as Hinata's thumb pressed against the head of his firmly. Am I gonna get the mouth if I say words like that? So I'm just not gonna say it. I don't know. I mean, not like my issues monotone anyway, but I mean, eventually. Dragging up and down sensitive skin. Yep. Hinata let the muscle memory in his hand take over, shoulders still barely moving, while his wrist did all the work below the surface. He could feel Komaeda's thighs squeezing at his sides, water sloshing against them, and them both as he trembled. And finally, Komaeda jerked his head away from the restraint to put his mouth. Komaeda jerked his head away from the restraint to put his mouth underwater instead, crying out, nearly muted, into the pool as Hinata felt he come. Komaeda went limp again, suddenly burdened by the weight of the water surrounding him, squeezing against him while he gasped as quietly as he could. Hinata caught him when he slumped over, once again getting a rush from the sense of the power that buoyancy afforded him. He pulled Komaeda's suit back up over his narrow hips, while his mind churned out a new story for the situation. He became fatigued while we were swimming, so I was helping him out, really. Which had become an automatic process whenever they were alone together, weaving small lies, or at the very least, excuses for being near him. Wow, jeez. A minute ago, he didn't have a story or an excuse for what they'd been doing, and even though the moment had passed, his stomach dropped at the thought. It probably would have looked like I was trying to drown him. The fleeting idea sat heavily in his stomach. At least some of his classmates would be understanding if that was his alibi. Jeez. Either his guilt or from an imaginary situation of the treading of water seemed to trek to the edge of the pool field. His trek to the edge of the pool felt more difficult than it should have been. They arrived at the inset ladder, and he pushed Komaeda towards it. Come on, let's get out. It's late. Komaeda dragged himself up the steps, and Hinata followed, tensing up again as they started heading for the cottages. Is he just going to follow me into my room? It was earlier than when he would normally come by. Too early to seem safe sneaking around. Not that it mattered to him just now what was safe. He was practically tiptoeing as they neared his door, but Komaeda was now trailing an appropriate distance behind him. Kept walking until he passed. Good night, Hinata-kun. Good night. He stood watching the pale, dripping wisp that seemed to drift redder, then walked to his cottage, and Hinata considered that perhaps he needed the weight of his usual attire to keep him from floating away. He vanished from sight when he slipped into his room, leaving behind a trail of pool water, and Hinata turned to his door and did the same. The usual pit of anxiety came to him immediately when his head hit the pillow. Is he going to come by tonight? Even though we were just together? If he doesn't, what is he doing? Should I be worried? What if he doesn't want to come by? That thought was new, but he didn't have time to dwell on how absurd it was when he heard the soft knock at his door. His heart jumped like it always did. Who could blame him from being jumpy in a situation like this? His feet hit the floor before he even realized what he was doing. He was at the door in an instant, but he paused with his hand hovering over the knob. And 3 and 2 and... He opened it slowly, relaxing his expression. Sorry, as always, to bother you again, Hinata-kun. If you're sick of me from today, which I'm sure you must be, I can leave you alone tonight. Hinata stepped aside, opening his door just enough for a wisp of a person to sneak through. Better here than off doing something weird by yourself. Komaeda offered a tired smile as he stepped inside. Hinata didn't notice it at first, but he brought something. His own pillow tucked under his arm, though it definitely seemed worth commenting on the implications. Neither of them mentioned it. Komaeda folded his jacket and placed it carefully on the couch as always. He crawled into Hinata's bed and loudly fluffed the pillow before collapsing messily on top of it. Hinata followed, pulling the blankets over both of them. Good night. Hinata mumbled into the sheets. He pulled up all the way to his mouth. Good night, Hinata-kun. His voice was small, directed at the wall. Thank you for letting me in again today. Okay. Hinata rolled over. He could feel Kamaya's hair tickling his nose. He stuffed both of his hands under his pillow. It was just more comfortable to sleep on his side. Komaeda shifted slightly. Getting to spend so much time with you today made me very happy. Go to sleep. Jeez, you're so mean. His hand moved just close enough that his fingers could feel the dip in the mattress where Komaeda lay beside him. Good night. Hinata closed his eyes, and after a few long minutes, sleep started to tug at the corner of his thoughts, distorting them at the edges. I wonder why he lets me sleep next to him like this. That wasn't right. He's lucky I let him sleep next to me like this. That was it. He likes being here. Of course. He's always here. Yeah. There's definitely something wrong with Komaeda. That was cute. I'm definitely checking out more of their games.